You're listening to Alternative Future Radio, home of the weird, resting place of the paranormal. Will take you to the furthest reaches of the galaxy and beyond. Strange phenomena, aliens, psychics, cryptozoology, conspiracy, holistic health, and UFOs. Alternative Future Radio, where spooky just got weird.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Out There Hour, the fabulous show starring Basil and Mark. I'm Mark. Hello.
The Out There Hour on Alternative Future Radio. The Out There Hour with Basil and Mark. www.alternativefutureradio.com.
Yay!
And thank you to the YouTuber and his comment.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he just said, yay!
That's what that was about.
Yeah.
It was on about 4 videos.
Hey, whoever you are, thanks for joining in.
It was actually more than one video.
Oh,
I saw a load of emails coming in that said comment, comment, comment. All of them, yay!
Good morning.
Good evening.
And good afternoon.
To Europe.
Africa.
The Middle East.
The world.
And everybody in between.
Dismantling the mainstream, one piece at a time. The Out There Hour.
You keep saying it, see if it sticks.
It will. It'll eventually stick in the...
Some stuff sticks.
In the subconscious of the public. It's like NLP.
NLP, really, yeah. Okay. Roswell incident.
Roswell incident.
That's what today is all about. I love the Roswell incident.
It's not something I know a lot about.
Well, you didn't.
But I do.
You've been doing a little bit of research. How can anybody not know about it? It's very interesting.
We're going to talk to a man called Tom Carey, somebody who does actually know a lot about it.
Yes, he is from the website www.roswellinvestigator.com.
His research has contributed to a number of books and articles on the Roswell incident, such as The Truth About the UFO Crash at Roswell.
Yeah.
He's
been on Sci-Fi Channel, on documentaries and such like.
Yeah.
Archaeological digs down there.
He's been on Larry King Live. He's been on CN8. He's been on the Fox News channel.
He's pretty much the go-to guy for Roswell.
Coast to Coast AM with George Orwell. We don't like to talk about that. He was born and raised in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Tom attended Philadelphia public schools where he was competitive in 3 sports. He attended Temple University on an athletic scholarship and graduated with a BS degree in business administration.
Oh, lovely.
After a stint in the Air Force, where he possessed top-secret crypto clearance, Tom became interested in anthropology and human evolution and received a master's degree in anthropology from California State University, Sacramento. Tom then received a fellowship to pursue a PhD in anthropology at the University of Toronto.
Yeah, so it gets around a bit.
He's a well-informed chap.
Yeah.
Is our Tom, plus an ex-military man.
Yes.
Since 1991, Tom's research has focused solely on the Roswell incident and the alleged retrieval cover-up by the US government of an alien spaceship and crew that crashed near the town of Roswell, New Mexico, in July 1947.
I think that says it all.
I think that says it all.
Oh, I can't wait.
Wow.
Can't wait.
I've had a bit of a busy morning looking at videos of witnesses on YouTube.
Oh, really?
There's a lot of them.
There is a lot.
Go and check it out for yourselves.
Google it.
But in the meantime, let's talk to Tom. And before that, let's have an advert.
Yes, but before that, let's have our contact details.
Oh, good idea.
We keep forgetting.
AlternativeFutureRadio.com. Stalk us on Twitter at OutThereHour. Send us hate mail to helpdesk@AlternativeFutureRadio.com. Insult us at Facebook.com/OutThereHour. Troll us on YouTube.com/AFRadioYT. Send us questions for upcoming guests, make requests, or just complain. It's all good. Alternative Future Radio, where spooky just got weird. Are you ready for an adventure? Prepare yourself for more alternative future radio than any human being should have access to. How do you get this? It's simple. With the new Alternative Future Radio Android application. You can download all the latest shows and the archived shows as well. Help support Alternative Future Radio for just $1.99. PayPal will bill you in your very own currency if you don't use dollars. Find out more at alternativefutureradio.com.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we now go over live to America to Mr. Tom Carey. Do we have you there, Tom?
I am here.
Excellent, Tom. Are you in?
How are you?
Are you in Philadelphia or Pennsylvania? I forgot.
I am just outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
I thought so.
One of the suburban townships. Yes.
I once saw Philadelphia through a little window on a little gangway across the airport when I changed planes once. That's as close as I ever got. It looked interesting.
Well, you were lucky then.
Well, we got you here to talk about.
I was born and raised in Philadelphia, and I lived 10 years in Sacramento, California, where I met my wife, Doreen, and then I went to school for 4 years in Toronto, Canada. But we've been here in Huntington Valley happily for the last, 1978. That makes it
34 years.
34 years, yes. We've been in Huntington Valley, yes.
Well, I'd say you did quite a bit of schooling. You have a master's degree in anthropology from California State University, I see here.
Yes.
And
I spent 4 years at the University of Toronto in the doctoral program, but I left. I watched too many hockey games, to be honest with you.
I hear this about you, Tom. I hear that you're a big sports fan.
Yes.
Also,
unfortunately, the Philadelphia teams aren't doing so well.
It happens. I'd say you're an ex-Air Force man as well.
Yes, I was spent 4 years in the Air Force during the Vietnam time. Had a top secret clearance, and I worked in the communications end of it, where messages going out to the Pacific and back from the Pacific had to be encrypted and decoded, and I was involved in that aspect of it. So you needed a top secret clearance for that.
Did you actually serve in Vietnam or in the U.S.?
No.
No. Oh.
No. I actually went into the Air Force. Let's see, 1963. So the war started in late 64, and the buildup didn't begin until 65, 66, 67. So I was out by the time the Vietnam War really got, was starting to really heat up. I got out in 1967. So, but they still, the veterans here, that's still part of the Vietnam era. But I actually went in before we actually became really engaged in Vietnam. So my overseas duty was actually in Alaska. Back in those days, they considered Alaska an overseas assignment, and that's where my overseas assignment was. And so I never, fortunately for me, had to go to Vietnam.
I think you were lucky.
Yes, some of my friends unfortunately went over there and didn't come back.
And the army training was a lot different for the Vietnam conflict than it was for World War II. I was reading,
absolutely.
Yeah, they were more trained to be more vicious for the Vietnam War, because back in World War II, I was reading an account by an artist called Jack Kirby, Marvel Comics, and he was saying that the Germans and the Americans used to shoot above one another's heads rather than shoot at each other, and they used to shout insults at each other because they just weren't really trained for killing.
I've never heard that one, to be honest with you. I don't doubt it. I mean, lots of things went on during World War II, especially probably at the end. No one wanted to get killed. So.
No.
Well,
and actually, I've deviated.
But a lot of vicious things did go on.
Oh, they sure
during
did.
World War II.
Yeah, I've completely deviated
Gone
from
off
today's
on one
subject.
again,
Sorry,
yeah.
Tom.
Well, we're dealing with events not long after World War II.
To be fair,
It has to be said,
fair,
not long after.
I'd say that.
Very interesting period, 1947. Lots of things happened in 1947, Tom. We got you on because we wanted to talk about Roswell, which is something which has been a pet subject of mine for a little while. We actually learnt about the Roswell incident at school. Can you believe, Tom?
No, really?
Yeah, and not really from the mainstream angle either. It has to be said, but. We were talking to somebody just the other day who said that, was it the NSA or the CIA that was formed?
The NSA.
The NSA, I think 2 weeks after Roswell.
I'm sorry, I didn't follow that. I heard the NSA, the National Security Agency, and
yeah, one of them was formed just after Roswell. I think it was the NSA. I can't remember if it was a documentary I was watching or a guest.
The CIA was because during World War II, that branch of the government was called the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services.
Yep.
And in September of 1947, the National Security Act formed the Central Intelligence Agency, and Admiral Hillenkoetter was the first director, I believe. Admiral Hillenkoetter, who was he said flying saucers were real. So we had a friend in those days, but those days are long gone because the CIA in 1953 instituted a policy, not only for them but for the Air Force and the military, to cover up UFO reports because they felt that the reporting of UFOs, whether they were actual real events or something that people imagined or misidentifying, the actual reporting of UFOs was a threat to national security in case the Russians tried something and wanted to block up our channels of communication. So that's why they de-emphasized it.
Well, I think we don't assume on this show that anybody knows anything about these subjects. So could we summarize what the Roswell incident was in plain language?
In a nutshell, yeah.
Yes. This is difficult for me because I get so involved in little details that we're working on. It's very difficult for me to summarize it, but here goes. On July the 8th, 1947, this is right after World War II, a headline was published in the Roswell Daily Record, the local newspaper there, that a flying saucer, that's the term they used, had landed and had been, they used the term captured by the Army Air Force base.
Yeah, the exact headline is RAAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. It says. I'm looking at the headline now.
Roswell Daily Record.
And that's not the RAF, the Royal Air Force. That's the Roswell Army Airfield.
Yep.
RAAF, Roswell Army Airfield captures flying saucer in Roswell region. And it was a very short story, didn't give a lot of details, but the headline itself was just, it got on the Associated Press wire and went around the world. That story went around the world in minutes.
Yep.
And before they knew it, the paper was receiving phone calls from all over the world. So within hours of this headline, the Air Force retracted the story that what they had first thought was a flying saucer, because at this time, the first week of July 1947, the modern age of UFOs burst onto the scene 2 weeks previously with the Kenneth Arnold sighting over the Cascade Mountains in Washington State. The country had been seeing UFOs, and they were front-page stories all over the country for 2 weeks. And then you have the Roswell headline. And so this really, because people were wondering, what is everybody seeing up there? What are these things that are outrunning our jets? And here the Air Force claimed at Roswell that they had captured a flying saucer. So you can imagine the interest that was kindled, in the minds of everybody. But within 3 hours, the Air Force denied the story, said that the people at Roswell, the Roswell airfield, now these were the people that ended World War II by dropping the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the 509th Bomb Group stationed at Roswell, that they were mistaken, that they had mistaken a tinfoil radar target, which they were all familiar with, and a neoprene rubber balloon, which even a 6-year-old would be able to identify, for an interplanetary spacecraft. That's you ever hear of the term suspension of disbelief?
Yeah.
It's a theatrical term. That's what this was. They said that the commander and the intelligence officer, they didn't know what they were looking at, and they mistook tinfoil, rubber, and baling twine for an interplanetary spaceship, and that they were mistaken. End of story.
Yep.
So the story died at that point. It died at that point. It goes to sleep for 30 years. I mean, that's all the world knows about it. Oh, my goodness, what dopes they have over there in Roswell. Too bad their fingers are on the atomic trigger. Because the sole mission of the 509th Bomb Group at Roswell is to deliver the atomic bomb on targets during time of war. That was why it was created in World War II. That's what it did in World War II, and that's why it was still in existence as the United States' first SAC base, the Strategic Air Command, in 1947. That's what it was. Its function was. But according to the Air Force higher-ups, they were dopes because they couldn't identify a weather balloon with a radar target.
Did they get discharged for that? Did they get discharged for that? Because you would think that anybody that couldn't tell the difference between a flying saucer and a weather balloon should really not be employed.
Yes. Especially in with their finger on the atomic trigger. Nobody seemed to ask that question. How could these guys be so stupid?
Yeah.
To get the whole world excited. If they could do that, they could make a mistake with the bomb. So, but nobody asked that question. The story died, and it wasn't until 1978 that the base intelligence officer there at the time at Roswell in 1947 finally spoke up. He knew he was dying of emphysema. His name was Jesse Marcel. He was the base intelligence officer at Roswell in 1947. He was the first military person out to the crash site to see the debris. And he finally spoke up. He was a ham radio operator. They have networks, and they talk back and forth at certain hours of the day. And he finally started talking over his ham network. And at that time, 1978, UFO researcher Stanton Friedman was in Louisiana giving a talk at a local, I guess he was being interviewed by a local TV station down in, I don't know the city in Louisiana. I know it wasn't New Orleans. It could have been Baton Rouge or another city. But after his interview, the producer said, hey, there's somebody you ought to talk to. He lives in Houma, Louisiana. He actually handled pieces of a crashed flying saucer. So Stan Friedman took his name and phone number and jotted it down and finally called Jesse Marcel. And that began the civilian investigation of this case. Up until that point, we knew nothing of it other than what the few things that were in the newspaper at the time in 1947. So 1978 marks the beginning of the civilian investigation of the Roswell incident. And as we speak, our investigation has identified and interviewed over 600 witnesses. Now, these are not all first-hand witnesses. First-hand, second-hand, third-hand family members. And our job is to put the little bits of information that we have gotten from so many witnesses. It's just like a jigsaw puzzle. We get the pieces, and it's up to us to put them all together. And what we have found is that sitting here today, I can tell you that a UFO, a flying saucer, flying disc, whatever you want to call it, did in fact crash in 1947 northwest of Roswell, New Mexico, with a crew of a minimum of 4, a maximum of 7, is somewhere between 4 and 7, one of which was still alive after the crash and was recovered. The event was covered up by the U.S. military and the U.S. government. They were successful for 30 years, but it started leaking in 1978, and we've been going after witnesses ever since. And that's basically the story. The Air Force still denies it. They say, well, we lied back in 1947 with that weather balloon story, but what it really was a scientific high-altitude series of balloons carrying a microphone to try to go high up in the stratosphere and go across to Russia and listen in for atomic bomb tests that were expected at that time in the late 40s. And what they failed to make the connection was that these balloons were the same type of balloons that they used in the weather balloon story. They were rubber, neoprene weather balloons trailing these same tinfoil radar targets. So the project, which was called Project Mogul, it was a high-level, constant-altitude balloon array designed to drift with the upper atmospheric currents across the Soviet Union, listening in for expected atomic detonations, which finally did take place in 1949, 2 years after Roswell in Russia, but they weren't detected by this Project Mogul. They were detected by chemical analysis of the atmosphere. So it was a failed project, but one that they were testing at the time. In fact, the guys at Roswell, the Air Force personnel in Roswell, they were familiar with this project because which was being run out of White Sands near Alamogordo, New Mexico. They had hoped to enlist the help of the people at the Roswell Army Airfield to help track these things, and the higher ups at the base, the commanders and the 8th Air Force said, no, we don't want to get involved in that. We have enough going on with our own stuff rather than to help you guys track weather balloons. So, but that's the Air Force position today, is that it was this Project Mogul, which is again a suspension of disbelief, because once you find out how many launches there were and when they took place, that theory falls apart like a cheap suit.
Well, the 509
like a cheap suit.
The 509 would have been well aware of what a weather balloon looked like, basically.
They should have.
Yeah, and they were also aware of Project Mogul.
Yeah, so
they were also aware of Project Mogul.
I think the question on the question on both our lips, Tom, is what exactly did crash in Roswell?
Well, I just want to finish before I get to that, I want to finish the second part of the Air Force explanation that they're still standing by today.
Oh.
The second part, the Air Force in 1997, which was the 50th anniversary of the Roswell incident, which by that time was big news around this country. I mean, they had a picture of an alien that appeared on the cover of Time magazine with the notation Roswell. It was covered by all the networks. It was just a high point of the case. And to sort of preempt the celebration or the notoriety that was going on, the Air Force came out with another explanation to cover the alleged bodies that were recovered, the alien bodies. And it was called the Roswell Report Case Closed, and it was published in '97. And their statement was that these reports of little creatures reported by witnesses were really these anthropomorphic dummies.
Yeah.
They were 6 feet tall. They looked human. They looked human. They were 6 feet tall. They were in regular flight suits. And what they were using them for were these high altitude parachute drops in preparation for the space program and upper atmospheric other doings in the upper atmosphere. So they didn't want to use live humans, so they used these dummies to test various things, dropping them from like 100,000 feet. And they said that what happened was that people were actually finding them on the desert floor. Again, these were run out of Albuquerque and White Sands in New Mexico, and that the people actually were describing these dummies that they came across, and we haven't found anybody that said they actually came across one, but that's what their story is, and that they actually confused the timing of these sightings, because these high altitude parachute drops took place 10 years after Roswell. So they said to cover the time disparity, they said, well, the people, as you age, your time frames get compressed.
Yeah.
So they used this time compression theory to explain away the fact that Roswell took place in 1947, and these dummy drops from the sky took place 10 years later. And that's the Air Force story today as we speak.
Well, that's convinced me. I don't know. That's been the show, everybody.
My memory's not great either, but it's not that bad.
Again, look up in your theatrical dictionaries the term suspension of disbelief, and that's what you have.
Yep.
Anyway, as far as what actually did crash was now. I work with Don Schmidt and Kevin Randall, and we don't, because we're often asked, well, where did they come from? Where they came from and why they were here? We don't even look at that. We're still engaged in the quest to prove that this actually did happen. And it wasn't a weather balloon, it wasn't a rocket, it wasn't a jet fighter, it wasn't anything. It was a interplanetary craft that crashed, and it was recovered, taken to Roswell Army Airfield. It was taken to the Hangar 84, which is still there today. I've been there many times, and the bodies were recovered from 2 sites. We believe there are 3 sites involved in the case. We believe the ship exploded during a severe lightning storm. It's if you ever been to Roswell in July, they have what they call a monsoon season down there. These severe thunder and lightning storms, and we believe the ship was blown up by a lightning strike. We don't have anything else to go by. We do know that the ship was blown to smithereens, and it was either the inner cabin or an escape pod of some sort survived. It was egg-shaped, and it survived the initial explosion, and continued on for another 30 miles, 35 miles, and crashed closer to Roswell, about 30 miles north of Roswell. That's what we call the impact site. The first site where it exploded was over the J.B. Foster Ranch, where this rancher named Mac Brazel was the foreman. We call that the Brazel site, or the Foster Ranch site, which contained all these small pieces of metallic-like debris.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first site, and the third site is the impact site, where the ship that was egg-shaped, or the inner cabin, what was left of it, impacted the ground and came to rest. Now, in between those two sites is what we call the D. Proctor body site. There were no bodies found on the Brazel site. Mm-hmm. But a couple miles southeast of the Brazel site, there was a low bluff that one of the witnesses, he was a 7-year-old boy at the time, who was with Mac Brazel the day he found this stuff, said in 1994 he took his mother there, who was on her deathbed. He packs her up in a pickup and he takes her out into the desert to the second site, the D. Proctor site. The boy's name is D. Proctor, who died a few years ago. He says, "Mom, here's where Mac found something else." Now, why would he take his mother, who was on her deathbed at the time, pack her up, put her in a pickup, and take a bumpy, dusty ride out into the desert just to take her to a low bluff to tell her, here's where Mac found something else? Now, what we surmise, because we have other witnesses who were taken to that site at the time and described several small bodies, alien bodies. So we call that the D. Proctor body site. That's the second site. So there are your three sites. Now, at the impact site, there were also additional bodies. We think there were maybe 2 or 3 bodies at the D. Proctor body site. We think that there were maybe 4 bodies and 1 live alien at the impact site that came from the egg-shaped capsule. And the bodies were recovered. They were taken back to the Roswell base and ultimately shipped to Wright Field, which is now Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. Mm-hmm. We believe that the live one, we've heard many stories of that it died on the base, or it somehow got loose and started scaring some of the civilians in Roswell, and it was shot. It lived until 1952 at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base when it expired. So we've heard a number of different stories of what happened to the one that was alive. So that's and the wreckage, we believe, is still at Wright-Patterson. It's been some of it has been re-engineered into various things, and we have interviewed people who have worked on it. We have witnesses everywhere, all the way along the line, from the crash sites all the way to Wright Field, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. We have witnesses along the whole line. Mm-hmm. We have witnesses from years later. We know they loaned the bodies around for inspection to various locations, and no doubt they did dissections and things like that. So we're still trying at this point. We're trying to locate physical evidence. Mm-hmm. We have come into something that we're checking it out now. The term is we're trying to determine its provenance. Mm-hmm. You know, how trace it all the way back to its source. That if it proves out, it will be proof that everybody's been looking for.
Tom, when I was at school, we were learning about the Roswell incident, somewhat unusually, and one thing that I printed out a timeline of the Roswell incident that I found online to help us work through it today, and the one thing that stands out to me is Jesse Marcel was the intelligence officer based at Roswell Army Airfield Base, and he actually took a piece of that wreckage home, didn't he, to show his children? And we learnt about this at school, and his children, his son Jesse Marcel Jr. wrote a book about the whole thing later on in life, and they described this metal as being like tinfoil, but smooth, and you can crunch it, and it regained its shape. And
I've got a description here
go on.
from Lieutenant Jack Trowbridge, I think, and he described it as being like Hershey bar wrappings.
Yeah, but they'd sprung back into shape and held its shape, and talk of symbols and such like, and they would obviously be a pretty good witness, especially the children, because they'd have very little to gain from that. One would think.
I know Jesse Marcel Jr. He is a soul of the earth type person. He's a medical doctor, a helicopter pilot, and he just it's impossible for him. I can't imagine him ever making anything up like this.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just the consummate, star witness type person for, if you have a case. I mean, he's just a great guy. He's incapable of making this stuff up. And the metal you're describing is what we call a memory metal.
Yeah,
it's the memory metal. It's our holy grail of Roswell.
Yeah,
and we're searching for a piece of memory metal because we still don't have anything completely like this. There have been attempts made to duplicate it, but it just doesn't come, all the way. It's in that direction, but it's not to that extent of this memory metal. We still don't have anything like it, and if we have a piece of that, we don't have to take it out to a lab and have it spend 6 months or a year in a lab being analyzed. You can wad it up in your hand, hold it over a flat surface, let it go, and it'll flatten out before it hits the surface. You can tell right away just by looking at it in those few seconds. We still don't have anything like that, and that's what we call our holy grail of Roswell. It's the memory metal, and we're looking for a piece of that.
Yeah, that would be nice to get our hands on, certainly. Now, another thing that is interesting about Roswell, you talked about the was it the 509th Bomb Squadron somehow being able to not distinguish between a UFO and a weather balloon that they launched themselves, which in itself is a little bit of a hard stretch to believe. But one other thing that leaps out at me is what a monumental screw-up the whole exercise was on the part of the U.S. Army, because their intelligence officer, well, I believe it was the intelligence officer, but somebody on the base leaked the whole thing to the media before consulting anybody higher up.
We've had arguments over the years of the original press release. Was it planned, or was it a local faux pas, a local mistake by the base commander, or by the intelligence officer, or by the public information officer? It's always been an argument. We know that the press release was, it was written and produced. Colonel William Blanchard, the base commander at the Roswell Army Airfield at that time, called Walter Hout. We had been friends with Walter Hout for 20 years, another great guy who was the public information officer, and he said, Colonel Blanchard called him in. He said, I want you to draft the press release, and here's the elements of it for distribution to the local Roswell media. That would be 2 radio stations and 2 newspapers, which Walter Hout did. Now, Jesse Marcel himself, I think, made the comment that some eager beaver public relations officer, did the press release. Well, that's not true. It was from Colonel Blanchard to Walter Hout and then to the media. The question is, did Colonel Blanchard do it on his own, or did he get orders from above to do this? Did it go? And and when Walter Haut died, he wrote a sealed statement, which was unsealed after his death in 2005. And to make a long story short, it all came from Washington. It was orchestrated from Washington to put out this story, as wild as it was, and then to quickly take it away. And that's a tried and true method of, when you want to kill something, you put it out there, then take it away with a simple explanation that everybody can say, "Oh my goodness, how could I have been so stupid to believe that story in the first place?"
So they put it out for the sole purpose of debunking it.
Yes. That's exactly right.
My next question, I'm not sure if you already answered this in what you were saying, but my next question would be again, did any of them get discharged for doing this? Because, I mean, if you were a base commander and you leaked something as monumentally big and
a threat to national security,
surely you would expect to be given, your marching orders, quite literally.
If William Blanchard, if Colonel Blanchard, a West Point graduate, 6'5", movie star, good looks, had made this faux pas, that wouldn't have mattered.
Right.
They would have canned him.
Yeah. I mean, the guy was in charge of the bomb group, wasn't he?
But he went all the way to the Pentagon, got 4 stars, became a general. This is a full general. He was next in line to be the chairman of the chief of staff of the Air Force. He was the second in command, all the way up to the top of the Air Force when he died at his desk in the Pentagon at age 50. He had 4 stars by age 50, so it didn't affect him at all. And others, Jesse Marcel, he got out of the Air Force the next year, as did Walter Haut, the base public information officer, which is curious because Jesse Marcel, after he left Roswell Field, he went to work in the Pentagon with a higher responsibility. I mean, when President Truman made the announcement that the Russians had detonated an atomic device, it was Jesse Marcel who wrote up Truman's, his what he was speaking from.
That is not the career progression Marcel of people who screwed up.
Yeah, instead of getting canned, they got promoted. And Walter Haut also left the service in '48. He said he just got fed up with military life, but he could have followed Blanchard all the way to the Pentagon also and gotten at least 1 star. He could have done that. Instead, he gets out of the Air Force in 1948 and becomes an insurance salesman. That part doesn't add up. Something must have happened to both Marcel and Haut that they felt it was better for them to get out of the service. I don't know what that was. They never told us.
Maybe they weren't high up enough to be safe.
Marcel became a TV repairman in Houma, Louisiana. Now, what is more important, writing copy for the President of the United States or fixing TVs in Houma, Louisiana?
How would somebody go from that? It just seems strange that somebody would go from such an elevated position with so much potential, having just screwed up apparently, to being a TV repairman. No offense to TV repairman, but I mean, as you say, the guy was doing quite well. Seems very unusual.
Yes. And Walter Haut was such a compelling gentleman. He would have made 1 star easily. But he got out. I think he had an art gallery for a while. He sold insurance, and I don't know, but it wasn't being a general in the Air Force. To me, it doesn't add up. But what they did, though, is that they people that knew about the bodies, civilians, they threatened them with their lives. They brought in thugs to threaten them with death if they ever talked. military people, they just shipped out to other, far away. They dispersed them around the world, and that's what they did. So they couldn't compare notes, and so that's how they took care of that.
I've been this morning. I spent watching. I was so amazed, an overwhelming amount of witness testimony videotaped. Most of them are quite elderly, and most of them are elderly and the sons and daughters of the original witnesses. But at their ages, they seem very genuine, and I don't think they've got anything to gain, and they haven't anything to lose. They just seem to want to testify, to get the story out.
Yeah.
From what I've seen.
Well, one of the... was this on television or a videotape?
It was YouTube.
Oh, okay.
It was probably from TV originally, I'd say.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, most of the original people are gone now. We're still looking for them, and we still, if you figure somebody who was 20 years old in 1947 is now 80.
That's right.
5 years old today.
Yeah.
So if you're 20 in 1947, you're looking at an 85-year-old person. Most people haven't lasted that long. Some of them are still alive. They're in their, starting at 85 on up to. I've interviewed somebody who was 98 recently.
As I say, some of them were the sons and daughters of the original witnesses, or relations, or family members.
Even the sons and daughters are passing away.
They are.
True.
They're very elderly looking.
The two daughters of Sheriff Wilcox, who was the sheriff of Chavez County in Roswell in 1947. Both of his daughters are gone.
Great.
We're talking to grandchildren now a lot.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about that is oftentimes where the actual participant, had we found them, would not have talked to us, the grandchildren will. So there is some benefit on occasion to that they passed away, but we've missed a lot of the originals. We just never, because the way we do it today is we just go on the internet and we can locate them via the internet directory, the telephone directory.
Right.
Back when I started in this investigation in 1991, what you had to do was you had to find out pretty much where the person lived and call information on the telephone, and it was $1 a shot. And we had many telephone bills over months that were over several $100s because you had to call information, and then they came out with these CD discs, telephone directories, and that was a big improvement. But that was a static, after the year was, they were out of date in a year's time. So the internet, though, is really, if we had the internet back 20 years ago, we would have located many, many more people than we actually have. And it's not due to lack of effort. I mean, we work on this case just about every day, and we're still trying to locate witnesses. But if we had this tool, the internet, in 1991 when I started, we would have found many, many, many more witnesses and their relatives if they had passed away.
But as you say, a number of these people, especially the ones in the Army and the Air Force, they've been sent to the four winds, and who knows where they settled. They could be anywhere. They could be in Germany or Guam or anywhere, for all we know.
I traced one up to Alaska, and I found his son, and unfortunately fortunately the son had the same name as the father, but the father had died a few years before and had never said anything. But I remember I had looked for this fellow for years, and then I got a computer and the internet, and I was able to locate him in Alaska, at least his son. But we're coming very near to the end of all first-hand witnesses in this case because of age, and on top of that, many of the ones who are still alive, they're suffering the maladies of old age. Alzheimer's being one, and a number of other things. So I would say, if someone asked me, I'd say there's less than 5% of the original participants. Less than 5% are still alive. When you take away the deaths and you take away the ones who are incapable of speaking to us, I'd say there's less than 5%. You know what? Like I said, oftentimes. Go ahead.
Sorry. Is there any information that was classified at the time that was put under maybe a 50-year rule or a 70-year rule or anything like that? Is there anything due to be released at all?
Well, there are rules, but in 1993-94, a U.S. congressman named Stephen Schiff, who's unfortunately dead now, he tried to get information about Roswell, and he went to the Department of Defense, and they gave him what he felt was the runaround.
Mm-hmm.
So he went to the General Accounting Office, which is now known as the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, which is the investigative arm of Congress. And he asked them to look into the Roswell case only to verify the documents pertaining to the case, which originated in 1947, have been properly handled.
Yeah.
He wasn't trying to prove the case one way or the other. He was just trying to determine if the documentation, say that, the teletype messages, the things like that, phone records, anything, any document, physical document, whether they were being handled properly. Well, what the General Accounting Office found out was that all those documents had been mysteriously destroyed years before without known authority. Now, you can't do anything in the government or the military without authority. Mm-hmm. There's always an authority, a regulation, something covering what you're doing. Well, the destruction of these documents, both out of Roswell Airfield, Army Airfield, and Fort Worth, the next higher command, had been destroyed, and they don't know who did it or why. So, to answer your question, the answer is no, because all those documents have been destroyed.
Again, another little indicator that things don't quite add up.
Amongst all of the witnesses that have been spoken to and gone on record, or that perhaps you've spoken to, is there a common description of the body that was found, of the alien?
Yes. There is a common description.
Yeah.
Which is remarkable. Now, I don't know how old you fellas are, but I remember I read comic books when I was a little kid. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. Comic books, and back in those days, this would be like the early 50s. The common description of Martians, which is what we called aliens back then, we called them Martians.
Yeah.
The description and the depiction of them was like a little goblin creature, maybe 2 feet tall with a big head, but with these big flappy ears, like elephant ears, like a goblin.
Yeah.
That was the classic description of what the Martians looked like.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like one of my neighbors.
Yeah, either that or some like big erector set, like an H.G. Wells movie, War of the Worlds. There was like a giant erector set with legs, the erector set leg, plomping around. But the description of these, the Roswell aliens, is nothing like those. They're humanoid creatures, 3.5 to 4 feet tall, very frail body, but the dominating feature is the large head, like the shape of an inverted egg or an inverted pear.
Mm-hmm.
Large head, wide set eyes, no ears, no nose, no mouth, just a slit for a mouth, two little holes in the front of the face, or maybe with a little nubbin for a nose, and just two holes in the side of the head for ears. Grayish, grayish color, either even described as grayish purple, grayish white, grayish green. Various shades of gray.
Mm-hmm.
Was that?
And
was that?
That's what it's been described as.
Was it skin or a spacesuit? Did anybody say?
Most have described a skin-tight, silvery, maybe pewter color, skin-tight body suit of some sort. Almost like a second skin. That's the way it's been described. Was nothing like these anthropomorphic dummies that the Air Force says they were. They wore regular flight suits, which were like khaki overalls.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what they were wearing. And there's just nothing to compare them to the description that the people have given. So they've all been pretty consistent. Not everything is identical, but they all talking about the same thing.
Well, what about this other thing I've heard about the what we've described as the memory metal, this very light, almost sweet wrapper metal, silver,
very
color.
thin.
Yeah,
like cooking foil, but strong.
Very, very strong, and returns to its original shape no matter what way you squeeze it. But we've heard tell of hieroglyphics or some kind of markings,
symbols
on it. Has anybody spoken of that?
A number of witnesses. Starting with Jesse Marcel Jr. and Jesse Sr. talked about strange markings. That they called them various things like hieroglyphs or petroglyphs or Chinese writing, anything, because they couldn't identify them, and that's what they were trying to say. They was writing like they've never seen.
Yeah.
They were on these so-called I-beams, these little beam-like structures that Jesse Marcel talks about that he saw. Others have talked about markings on the various pieces of metal, and none of them could identify them. So the Air Force literally vacuumed up the desert floor to get everything. We believe there's still pieces out there, and we've had one archaeological dig in 2002 at the Brazil Ranch site, and we only covered less than 10% of the known site. So we did not dig very large area, and we plan on going back. The problem is coordinating everything. We're not funded. The dig in 2002 was sponsored by the Sci-Fi Channel, so we were able to do it. And but most things come out of our own pockets, and so it's very difficult. Plus, Don Schmidt lives in Wisconsin, and I live in Pennsylvania, and New Mexico is out west, and it's very expensive proposition to travel and do things. So we do our best, and we think accomplished a lot, because we have identified the framework of this story, what took place, when things took place, who did what, and where it's at now, and where we hope to go with it.
Tom, I'm not sure if I'm remembering this correct or not. I'm not seeing it listed on my timeline that I printed off, but I seem to recall that Jesse Marcel had 2 children. Did he have a daughter as well? And if I'm right, has anybody spoken to her? I have a memory of him having 2 children.
That's a good question. I am only aware of a son. I think they only had a son.
I've got. Do you know one of those memories that you sometimes have, and it turns out to be right usually? I've got a memory that he had a son and a daughter.
He has a granddaughter who I've met. Denise Marcel was actually in the movie Roswell. She's an actress. You might be thinking of the granddaughter.
No, when I learnt about this stuff, it was probably too long ago. It was at least 25 years ago when we were taught about this stuff, and I'm sure that there was mention of more than one child. But maybe I have a false memory projection.
That is a good question.
Google it.
I will. I will. If you email me if you find out a source for that, let me know, because I've spoken to Jesse a number of times, and we're good friends with him, and I've also met his Jesse's daughter Denise, which was the Jesse Senior's granddaughter, and I am unaware of a sister of Jesse Jr.
I don't know where it came from, but it's in the back of my brain somewhere.
One last question for Tom. And you know what I'm like.
Go on.
How's the collection of oldies coming along, Tom? Oldie records.
I am still I am a collector of oldies. I start they go back to 1940. I don't go beyond 1940. I was wondering.
Yeah. You don't go beyond 1940.
And I go forward. Huh?
So they're
I go forward from 1940. Plus, I lose interest about somewhere in the 1970s. They become fewer and fewer and fewer. I would say the 50s and 60s are the bulk of my oldies.
Nice.
But there's a scattering from the 40s because I like the big band era, and there's a scattering going beyond the 60s. There's a few in the 70s and 80s that I like.
Big band, Glenn Miller. Whatever happened to him?
Well, we know what happened to him. That's another show entirely.
And unfortunately, Tom, there were so many things we didn't get to cover today with you because we've run out of time. Is there anything what's the future hold for you? Have you got anything coming up? Any talks or any other books or anything?
Do feel free to plug everything.
The end of this month, I will be joining Don Schmidt, and Stan Friedman, Kevin Randall, and a number of others, again, down in Roswell for the UFO Festival. We will be speaking, Don and I will be speaking 4 times, as will all the others, and I think David Rudiak will be there. Just a lot of, they have this festival every July, and unfortunately, when the media covers the Roswell incident, they tend to focus on the zaniness of the festival, like everything is like that, but it's not. It's
people wearing tinfoil hats,
put on
etc.
Serious talks. I'm sorry.
People wearing tinfoil hats, etc.
Yes. That's the festival, and but we'll be going down there, and we're planning another archaeological dig. And we are we're working on another book.
The website is Roswell Investigator.
Yes. www.roswellinvestigator.com is our website. And we are on this case until we have final proof. And as I mentioned earlier, we have come into possession of something. I'm not at liberty to tell right now.
Mystery.
But if it pans out, then that's proof.
Wow.
That's all I can tell you.
Okay, well that's quite a thing to leave us with.
Yes, we'll have to get you back if you find out what that is.
Tom, you've been speaking to
all of the skeptics. The debunk. They call themselves skeptics, but they're really debunkers.
Yeah.
They always say, "Show me the proof." Well, testimony is evidence in a court of law.
God.
Yeah.
And if you get enough testimony. It acts as a proof.
Yeah.
And testimony has sent people to the gallows, to meet their maker. But the so-called skeptics and the debunkers don't consider testimony as proof. Well, we think we have enough testimony that it consists of evidence and it's a proof. But we recognize that to to put the cap on this thing, we really need some physical evidence, and that's what we're shooting at. And like I said, we've come into possession of something. I'm not at liberty to discuss any further. If it pans out as far as the origin of it, we can trace it back, and everything will check out that it's proof.
Fantastic.
Okay,
Thank you, Tom. Thanks for coming on. That was fantastic.
Thanks for speaking to us and to Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. We don't get this type of information over this side of the globe very often. So it's been really, really kind of you to come on. Thank you.
I hope to get to your fine country in the future. I've always wanted to see the home of my ancestors.
Great.
If you're over, then stop in. We'll give you a nice cup of tea and then grill you for 3 hours.
Okay. It's been my pleasure, fellas.
Hey, Tom, maybe if at some point in the future you're free to come back on to cover all the stuff we didn't cover.
Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. Just let me know, and I'll be happy to come back.
Wonderful, Brilliant. Tom. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thanks, Tom. That was Tom Carey. Wow. I love Roswell incident. It's one of my pet subjects.
What an interesting guy.
Fantastic.
I just want to mention his book, Witness to Roswell, published in June 2007, available on Amazon.
Yeah.
It's a big book.
Really? Yeah.
It's a big book.
You would imagine.
Plenty of information in it, and if you're interested, it's one of the number one. I mean, it's been reviewed by an astronaut, for heaven's sakes.
Which one?
Edgar Mitchell.
Edgar J. Mitchell.
Edgar J. Mitchell, the Apollo astronaut.
Apollo 16. Was it 16 or 14? I think it was. Sixth man on the moon.
He highly recommends it, so I guess we can.
Yeah, probably. If he says it goes, then it goes. I still want to get him on as a guest.
Say hello to us on Facebook, on the Facebook page.
Yeah, why not? Shall I send contact details to finish us off for today?
Yeah, just say hello, say what you like, say what you don't like about the show.
People often do.
Correspond with us.
Suggestions.
We like to hear from you.
Decent ones.
And thanks to all the people who like the Out There Hour Facebook page,
recently.
by the way, recently.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I friended all of you.
Really?
Yeah.
You're such a loser.
You're listening to Alternative Future Radio, home of the weird, resting place of the paranormal. We'll take you to the furthest reaches of the galaxy and beyond. Strange phenomena, aliens, psychics, cryptozoology, conspiracy, holistic health, and UFOs. Alternative Future Radio, where spooky just got weird.
AlternativeFutureRadio.com. Stalk us on Twitter @OutThereHour. Send hate mail to helpdesk @AlternativeFutureRadio.com. Insult us at Facebook.com/OutThereHour. Troll us on YouTube.com/AFRadioYT. Send us questions for upcoming guests, make requests, or just complain. It's all good. Alternative Future Radio, where spooky just got weird.
California, where I met my wife, Doreen. And then I went to school for 4 years in Toronto, Canada. So, but we've been here in Huntington Valley happily for the last, 1978. That makes it
34 years.
34 years, yes. We've been in Huntington Valley, yes.
Well, I'd say you did quite a bit of schooling. You have a master's degree in anthropology from California State University, I see here.
Yes.
And
I spent 4 years at the University of Toronto in the doctoral program, but I left. I watched too many hockey games, to be honest with you.
I hear this about you, Tom. I hear that you're a big sports fan.
Yes.
Also,
unfortunately, the Philadelphia teams aren't doing so well.
It happens. I'd say you're an ex-Air Force man as well.
Yes, I was spent 4 years in the Air Force during the Vietnam time. Had a top secret clearance, and I worked in the communications end of it, where messages going out to the Pacific and back from the Pacific had to be encrypted and decoded, and I was involved in that aspect of it. So you needed a top secret clearance for that.
Did you actually serve in Vietnam or in the U.S.?
No.
No. Oh.
No, I actually went into the Air Force, let's see, 1963. So the war started in late 64, and the buildup didn't begin until 65, 66, 67. So I was out by the time the Vietnam War really got...
I was actually know a lot about it.
Yes, he is from the website www.roswellinvestigator.com.
His research has contributed to a number of books and articles on the Roswell incident, such as The Truth About the UFO Crash at Roswell.
Yeah.
He's
been on Sci-Fi Channel on documentaries and such like.
Yeah.
Archaeological digs down there.
He's been on Larry King Live. He's been on CN8. He's been on the Fox News channel.
He's pretty much the go-to guy for Roswell.
Coast to Coast AM with George Orr. We don't like to talk about that. He was born and raised in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Tom attended Philadelphia public schools where he was competitive in 3 sports. He attended Temple University on an athletic scholarship and graduated with a BS degree in business administration.
Oh, lovely.
After a stint in the Air Force, where he possessed top-secret crypto clearance, Tom became interested in anthropology and human evolution and received a master's degree in anthropology from California State University, Sacramento. Tom then received a fellowship to pursue a PhD in anthropology at the University of Toronto.
Yeah, so it gets around a bit.
He's a well-informed chap, is our Tom, plus an ex-military man.
Yes.
Since 1991, Tom's research has focused solely on the Roswell incident and the alleged retrieval cover-up by the U.S. government of an alien spaceship and crew that crashed near the town of Roswell, New Mexico, in July 1947.
I think that says it all.
I think that says it all.
Oh, I can't wait.
Wow.
Can't wait.
I've had a bit of a busy morning looking at videos of witnesses on YouTube.
Oh, really?
There's a lot of them.
There is a lot.
Go and check it out for yourselves.
Google it.
But in the meantime, let's talk to Tom. And before that, let's have an advert.
Yes, but before that...
It was starting to really heat up. I got out in 1967. So, but they still, the veterans here, that's still part of the Vietnam era. But I actually went in before we actually became really engaged in Vietnam. So my overseas duty was actually in Alaska. Back in those days, they considered Alaska an overseas assignment, and that's where my overseas assignment was. And so I never, fortunately for me, had to go to Vietnam.
I think you were lucky.
Yes, some of my friends, unfortunately, went over there and didn't come back.
And the army training was a lot different for the Vietnam conflict than it was for World War II.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they were more trained to be more vicious for the Vietnam War, because back in World War II, I was reading an account by an artist called Jack Kirby, Marvel Comics, and he was saying that the Germans and the Americans used to shoot above one another's heads rather than shoot at each other, and they used to shout insults at each other because they just weren't really trained for killing.
I've never heard that one, to be honest with you. I don't doubt it. I mean, lots of things went on during World War II, especially probably at the end. No one wanted to get killed. So.
No.
Well,
and actually, I've deviated.
But a lot of vicious things did go on.
Oh, they sure did.
World War II.
Yeah, I've completely deviated from today's subject.
Again,
Sorry, Tom.
Well, we're dealing with events not long after World War II.
But to be fair,
it has to be said, not long after.
Let's say that.
Very interesting period, 1947. Lots of things happened in 1947, Tom.
You're listening to Alternative Future Radio, home of the weird, resting place of the paranormal. Will take you to the furthest reaches of the galaxy and beyond. strange phenomena, aliens, psychics, cryptozoology, conspiracy, holistic health, and UFOs. Alternative Future Radio, where spooky just got weird.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Out There Hour, the fabulous show starring Basil and Mark. I'm Mark. Hello.
The Out There Hour on Alternative Future Radio. The Out There Hour with Basil and Mark. www.alternativefutureradio.com.
Yay!
And thank you to the YouTuber and his comment.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he just said, yay!
That's what that was about.
Yeah.
It was on about 4 videos.
Hey, whoever you are, thanks for joining in.
It was actually more than one video.
Oh,
I saw a load of emails coming in that said comment, comment, comment. All of them, yay!
Good morning.
Good evening.
And good afternoon.
To Europe,
Africa.
the Middle East,
The world.
and everybody in between.
Dismantling the mainstream one piece at a time. The Out There Hour.
You keep saying it, see if it sticks.
It will. It'll eventually stick in the
Some stuff sticks.
in the subconscious of the public. It's like NLP.
NLP, really, yeah? Okay. Roswell incident.
Roswell incident.
That's what today is all about. I love the Roswell incident.
It's not something I know a lot about,
Well, you didn't.
but I do.
You've been doing a little bit of research. How can anybody not know about it? It's very interesting.
We're going to talk to a man called Tom Carey, somebody who does...
Let's have our contact details.
Oh, good idea.
We keep forgetting.
AlternativeFutureRadio.com. Stalk us on Twitter at Out There Hour. Send us hate mail to helpdesk@AlternativeFutureRadio.com. Insult us at Facebook.com/Out There Hour. Troll us on YouTube.com/AFRadioYT. Send us questions for upcoming guests, make requests, or just complain. It's all good. Alternative Future Radio, where spooky just got weird. Are you ready for an adventure? Prepare yourself for more Alternative Future Radio than any human being should have access to. How do you get this? It's simple. With the new Alternative Future Radio Android application, you can download all the latest shows and the archived shows as well. Help support Alternative Future Radio for just $1.99. PayPal will bill you in your very own currency if you don't use dollars. Find out more at AlternativeFutureRadio.com.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we now go over live to America to Mr. Tom Carey. Do we have you there, Tom?
I am here.
Excellent, Tom. Are you in?
How are you?
Are you in Philadelphia or Pennsylvania? I forgot.
I am just outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
I thought so.
One of the suburban townships. Yes.
I once saw Philadelphia through a little window on a little gangway across the airport when I changed planes once. That's as close as I ever got. It looked interesting.
Well, you were lucky then.
Well, we got you here to talk about.
I was born and raised in Philadelphia, and I lived 10 years in Sacramento, California.